Hello, everybody. I'm Sudha Jamthe, and we are here at Weekly Wednesday. And I'm super excited because we've been talking about artificial intelligence for a while, and there is so much happening in the autonomous vehicle space. And so I went back and got my amazing student, Karolina Chachulska, who has actually been here before. And in fact, I have to tell you, even before she came to my class, she was so smart about the AV space. I remember you started the LinkedIn group for the class for networking, right? When you took the AV class at Stanford. Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, we were all very engaged in your class.
Yes.
So
cool. So you talked to us from RideCell, right, about operations and how to build a rideshare business in the last round. So thank you for joining us. So where are you joining us from today? Because with COVID, everybody's in different places.
Yeah, sure. So actually, at this very moment, physically, I'm joining from Poland. I'm here just for a few weeks, visiting my parents and pretty much, and so making use of a bit of a remote work, but pretty much also just enjoying time off and enjoying some family time. So that's great. I'll be back in US in the next 2 weeks. So, but this time I'm joining from Poland. I'm in my my parents' house in my old room. So it's lots of memories coming in, so to speak. But professionally, I'm working right now with a company called InfoEdge. It's a boutique consultancy. And we focus on several very niche things. One of the things I focus specifically on and my team is a customer experience. And there's just so much to talk about when we're thinking about customer experience in the transportation space. I'm very much looking forward to talk about this. And of course, about this and about some business models, as well as just pure observations and trends, everything that we see happening in the past crazy year, 2020.
Yes, definitely. And you have a podcast. I just noticed. You have podcast.
Yes, I actually have two. So within InfoEdge, I actually have a podcast called The Loyalty Map, where we interview industry leaders in the customer experience space, and it's absolutely wonderful. We had so many smart people coming in and telling us about things they do in a customer experience space, like great pilots or things they were able to operationalize on a huge space. So innovative ways of engaging customers. So that's really, really exciting. And I'm also part of a group that is called Women in Automotive Technology. And over there, together with Lisa, we started a podcast called On the Move, where we talk to industry leaders female industry leaders in a automotive space. So I'm also very excited about this. So
I think one of the things that's happened with the pandemic is right at the heart of mobility, right? People are arrested and they're not able to move and go to work and travel as usual. And I think that's created opportunities with the whole AV space, right? Because there's a lot of movement. So let's unpack that. There's lots to cover. And I have a course called AIX, which is about experience in car, intra-car. So I'm excited to hear about CX and what you're finding in that space too. So where should we start? What has happened with the whole AV space? Because within the 2020 pandemic year, Zeus was bought by Amazon.
Yes.
And just this year, beginning of this year, I think on Jan 20th, I spotted the Apple car is back driving around Cupertino. And there's a whole bunch of movement in delivery and logistics and trucking. So the space seems to have exploded suddenly. So what do you think about the movement?
Yeah, I think so. There's few things that are happening, and I hope I'm not repeating myself, because probably your listeners would know it. But it always also makes sense to step back and maybe talk about some of the trends, at least I observed. So I observe at least, four or five forces. So first of all, because of pandemic, is like you said, we were impacted when it comes to our mobility. I think the latest data that I was able to find on US DOT and Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, as of November, we were something like 14% of vehicle miles traveled down compared to the same time last year. So that's one big thing, right? So we definitely stopped commuting to the extent we were previously. So that's pretty big. We stayed at home. We definitely stayed at home because ride sharing got down significantly. It was anywhere between 75% to 90%, depending on the market, depending on the country, depending on on the moment. But definitely rideshare was got hit tremendously. And of course transit was down, right? So these are the things that we're seeing when it comes to staying at home. Then another thing that I see is, by all means, the fact that we're staying at home doesn't mean we're like not consuming things. So the delivery side exploded. Actually, Uber was lucky enough to have this arm of Uber Eats, because this was the driving force behind revenue in first few months of the pandemic, when rideshare was down anywhere between 75 to 90%. So when we look at that, people continue to consume. One other thing to note is actually, this delivery space is actually booming in all places, right? So when you see Uber just bought Drizzly, I think I'm pronouncing the company right. So it's a company that is that's an alcohol delivery. DoorDash, another delivery company, IPO'd quite nicely late last year. So this is happening. And then to your point, um, uh, Amazon, who bought Zoox recently, Amazon business is growing, Instacart business is growing. And one thing that I think people do value a lot these days is the feeling of safety. And I don't, maybe I'm not going to get into what's perceived safety, what's real safety. I've been reading quite a lot of studies that, people are just feeling uncomfortable getting on a train, where in fact there's no, the research suggests that getting on a train and public transportation doesn't necessarily have to be more place where you would get COVID way more. Nevertheless, there is a perception of feeling safety. Hence, one thing that people do these days care about is contactless everything, right? Like if we can, avoid contact, this is something that's very important. So contactless payments, which a lot of the companies have been, like Uber, Lyft, they're being on the front of this, but also, more and more transit agencies are now thinking, okay, how do we implement contactless payments so that we eliminate this risk of spreading the virus this way. But anyhow, because of the contactless is so important, I feel like this is opening up a very interesting route for all sorts of delivery bots. Not that I see them right now being utilized just for the pure fact that there's just not enough. Simply, there's not enough fleet, right? Like we don't have a fleet yet big enough to cover all our needs. Yet at the same time, I feel like if a pandemic saved somebody, I think the delivery bots would be the ones that were saved, that were served nicely by the pandemic, because most of the delivery bots would be in a contactless, situation. Yeah. So this is very important. And one thing that I actually also found very interesting, which is important, is early this year, I think, or late last year, NHTSA, so National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. If I'm getting the acronym right, but basically NHTSA released new revised standards when it comes to vehicles, which I think also makes sense a lot. So one may be a bit worried and cautious. Okay, what does it mean revised standard? Because frankly, they've been easing up on some of the standards they had for vehicles on US roads. But basically what this regulation did is like they get a waiver for something like the Neuro vehicle or any delivery bot for some of the things that are just not necessary when we're talking about delivery bots. So let's say that the standard for vehicle is that each vehicle needs to have a steering wheel, that each vehicle needs to have a mirror, side mirrors, that each vehicle needs to have a windshield and wipers. When we're thinking about Neuro, when we're thinking about other delivery bots, such things are not needed. So I think it's very good that those standards were eased. So there's no, I'd say, there's no I don't want to call them silly, but really unnecessary things. I was wondering how many people had an opportunity to see, for instance, Neuro vehicle. Did you see it, Sudha?
Yeah, I have seen the Neuro.
And the first time I saw it, I was actually so surprised because it did have those tiny little, side mirrors, because it had to have, so I was like, oh, wow, why do you have it? And I was like, well, we have to. So I'm actually very, I actually am super happy that this is, this is not there.
Lots to unpack here.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when we usually talk about the AV business, to get people to even think about autonomous vehicles beyond robotaxi as a
Mm-hmm.
bigger business and impacting many industries. You just gave a huge list. I want to take a step back. We talk about the business drivers of the industry. So one is consumer adoption and consumer sentiment. And I've had people who are new to this come in and say, I would not get rid of my car and I would never trust a robotaxi. You were talking about how consumer sentiment has just shifted and there is a need for perceived safety and
Absolutely.
leading to contactless, which kind of calls for the delivery bots and robotaxis to some extent, right? And one of the things I didn't say in the beginning is in 2020, one of the things that happened was the robotaxi from Waymo got officially launched, and it's still only Arizona. It's still a small pocket, but it's real, right? It's not just talk. But then the market seems to have shifted away from robotaxi with so many other possibilities. So one is the consumer shift. The other is regulation. You talked about how Neuro is lucky and delivery vehicles, and just the concept that we are adapting the concept of a vehicle. It doesn't have to even have wheels. It doesn't have all this paraphernalia that it had in the past. So those two are changes, and then regulation still has to catch up. That's always going to be there, right? And then the shift in business model, what we just thought will be ride share, which was the big thing, right? And do you see that as evolving to be the business model, or do you see some kind of partnership with public and private transit or logistics delivery? Where do you see that going?
Business model. So I guess few things there. So when it comes to, I actually think transportation is very local. So it probably will be very different in different places. I like the fact, for multiple reasons, I like the fact that we probably heard slightly less about robotaxis this year, and we've heard about all the other cool things.
Yeah.
And there's few things for that. First of all, it seems to me like robotaxis, as much as they're great, and I'm a big fan of everything that, for instance, Zoox or Waymo are doing, it feels to be a bit more, tougher nut to crack compared to a couple of other things that I feel could be an easier or more near-term solutions. So I feel, I actually think, and don't get me wrong, I actually don't think at this point there's a fleet big enough that could support the deliveries. Yet at the same time, having a delivery bot, it's way easier operationally to deploy than a robotaxi. And there's multiple reasons for that. So for instance, when we're thinking about any form of, you obviously have to have the place mapped, But when you're also thinking about it, people do care of getting from point A to B in rather quickest form, on like rather smoothest ride, and so on and so forth. When you're talking about parcels, it might not necessarily be the case. And one thing, for instance, that's critically important in delivery bots, but also in car sharing, anywhere when we have a connected vehicles, we need to be connected.
Yeah.
And this connectivity sometimes, even in downtown San Francisco, I sometimes don't have a reception on my cell phone. So when we're thinking about, from the perspective of how you actually need to usually equip any connected vehicles with not one but two cellular providers, map everything, ensure that the vehicles are moving only on the routes where you have this connectivity, and so on and so forth, it feels that in many cases this is easier to do these days versus having a robotaxi, because you just basically need more more operational effort to deploy. So that's one thing. I actually, from perspective of business model, I actually feel like another thing that I like about this delivery bots that are opening up to us is, right now we've been thinking about robotaxi as like what Waymo has is retrofitted Pacifica, so it's still a van. But I feel that the future AVs are not necessarily looking like sedan or like the cars we're driving right now. So this was obvious from Zook's presentation. This was also visible from Cruise Origin, and Cruise also presented their custom-made cars. So I feel, there is also a path in that direction, but I feel, as I say, it might be a tougher nut to crack, the robotaxis. They're still there. I'm not saying no, but it's gonna get, it's gonna get some time. Versus all sorts of, let it be delivery bots, or another thing that was pretty big was, for instance, I think there were like some of the cities in China had driverless cleaning cars, right? So those are all a bit more near-term solutions that could.
I remember David Kerrigan is here. I think I spotted him. Hi, David. He had actually spoken to our class, and last year in 2020, he ended up doing a AV master class with me here online. And one of his favorite collection is all the different stories and keep our focus global. So we just don't get too US centered, though we have, so many of the cars, especially here in California. I have like too many self-driving cars and robots and bots around me. So he keeps bringing this use cases of what is being tested out in so many places. It comes back to consumer adoption for those, and then does it make business sense? Like you're talking about, it makes sense sitting in the quarantine that the delivery bots would make business sense, but then to bring that big enough fleet and to scale to being a big enough business, what is the trade-off? And I saw one thing is KiwiBot. I keep tracking KiwiBot, and I like sharing pictures when I go chase it used to do delivery. And it used to be in Berkeley, and they used to deliver food for universities, I think, and they're not just here, but I think they had in Denver and a couple other cities in US, but US centered. And recently I heard they have expanded to San Jose, and they're not doing consumer delivery, and they're doing B2B delivery, which is kind of in neuro space, right? Nuto, Star, Flash, all of them, they all have that delivery. They've been made for delivery. And they're also creating it as a cute bot. They have like a version that looks different, that gets consumers. There's a psychology, there's some published stats that people are receptive to robots or kind of automated things that look cute. And so maybe a big vehicle, I remember Oro.ai had a not so pretty looking vehicle because they took a golf cart and made it into an even the Waymo one is retrofit. We still have that psychology of this is a car, which is an old Chevy, but it looks different, and we kind of make a comparison. So Zeus has an advantage with that. So one is the form factor. How do you see the form factor changing? Because they're building ground up, do you think that is going to create a whole new business model? Yes,
Absolutely. So, and another thing that, I think it's very, the thing about what I really like about this delivery bot is that it opens us for new ways of thinking about what is actually a vehicle. So this is why I really, really enjoyed. And I think the form factor has to change, for both human-driven vehicles as well as for AVs. So right now, it feels to me that we prioritize and we, even when we're making purchasing decisions about car, so something like a car we buy every several years, and yet we usually optimize the purchase for, those 2% of times when we will be driving I don't know, a team, a pack of 4 people for skiing, to skiing resort. So you're thinking about buying a big car where you could, put all your luggage, and therefore you end up buying like a huge SUV. You ended up not using not needing this place, but you at the same time use this vehicle all the time. What I think all those delivery bots will teach us, or like will help us understand us as a society, that there's actually so many different form factors that we could utilize. That's why I really, really like, the fact. So I'm not sure, I can't tell you, I can't promise you that, it's going to be a $1 trillion business in the next 2 years, because it probably won't. But at the same time, it's like a stepping stone for us to achieve something higher.
It
This is how
feels,
I see it.
in spite of the pandemic, it feels like we are beginning to move in the right direction. Earlier,
Exactly.
when we were thinking about this, I remember 2016, 17, it felt so far away. It felt like there were so many companies focused on technology to get us to level 5, and then saying, we can't tell you ever whether we'll get to level 5 and when we will get to level 5. That used to be the
Mm-hmm.
center of our conversation. And now it looks like there's so many different directions where we need to make change, but looks like we are making that change. So coming back to the form factor, I want to make sure we cover that topic before we
Mm-hmm.
move to something else, because we are covering a lot of different
Mm-hmm.
areas here. um, the Zeus vehicle that was showcased in December last year in
Mm-hmm.
2020 looks somewhere between the size of a Cruise and a Neuro, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
somewhere in between.
Yeah.
So does that signal that this is going to be set up for delivery, or are we assuming it because it's Amazon?
That's a very good question. I don't think there's anyone can give us an answer. So initially, to be honest, I personally was thinking that, like, okay, bye bye Robotaxi, but here comes my 1 hour delivery from Amazon Prime when I've heard the news. At the same time, I don't know, like, Robotaxi is still a big business. Zoox is quite well positioned to deliver it. Can the same technology be used for delivering of packages? One thing to think about Zoox is not only, the car is one thing, but the team is working on pretty cool technology when it comes to software as well.
Yeah.
Very, I don't think I have I don't have any insider information to really tell you, like, what is Zoox thinking, and what is Zoox planning. But I see definitely a lot of opportunities to use it. Also, when you think, right, like Amazon Transit or Amazon Freight, whatever the formal name is actually growing so significantly. They've announced so many different partners, and by partners they mean like a small operators where they would pretty much Amazon is doing everything they can to deliver us our toilet paper or our toothpaste or whatever we need momentarily. And I feel like there's definitely synergy from Zoox for that, but I don't think necessarily that will mean that Zoox completely will forget
Yeah.
the Robotaxi business as well.
Yeah. I remember one of the examples we saw with COVID and the interesting applications of AVs was Nuto. Actually partnered, I think they had a rebranding, and they ended up doing deliveries for Mayo Clinic, and they
Mm-hmm.
delivered COVID kits
Mm-hmm. Yes.
in Phoenix and in Texas, I believe. And
Mm-hmm.
it made sense because we definitely, whether we want to be contactless or not, we don't want to be, having humans touch the vaccine, not even the vaccine, we're talking vaccine now,
The
but
testing kits.
test kits, right? So it made sense, but that's not a scalable business, right? It's, that, we're not keep going to have hospitals use AVs to deliver their testing kits after COVID. Hopefully, we'll forget such a thing existed and, we'll go back to business as usual. So, but testing, that is important.
Mm-hmm. I think, if I was anywhere between like PR move as well as probably not only PR move, right? Like if, it served a purpose, but
Yeah.
at this point was very important purpose. I actually, there's definitely quite a lot of startups also working in a space of deliveries via drone, so drone deliveries.
Yeah.
And, then the focus is also hospitals and medical appliances or medications, blood, whatever is needed, especially in remote areas. So I'd say this is also an interesting space to look out for, and something that we'll see. I think at this point there's a lot of experimentation, but I already see some very cool companies, like there's Martifly, there's Zipline, there's so many really cool companies operating in the space.
Yeah.
Is it is it a $1 trillion business today? No, it's not. Does it have a potential? Absolutely.
I think Zipline actually did the delivery in Rwanda, and they were better positioned than other drones because they did blood supply, right? They were blood supply, so they must have that refrigerator setting, maybe not at the same temperatures. So they quickly jumped in and said, yes, we are going to do COVID vaccine delivery. So there's money in it, and there's an opportunity to solve a problem. I think that is where the business model is still being tested. Looks like is jumping in. And then the interesting thing I found is I have usually it's fun for me when my students connect back, and like you're running different podcasts, you're working on CX, so I want to talk about the whole AIX CX experience in a minute. We had one of my IoT students from the past, Vera Serdulika, came in last week and spoke about the edge, auto ML on the edge. And so what you said, whether we are going to lose connectivity and we might not be able to run the robotaxi even if it becomes connected vehicle, and there's more and more edge intelligence moving there. So Zeus also has the advantage that they have a connected vehicle because they made it from ground up.
Yeah, and then so computing power on the edge is very important. But one other thing, let me just give you an example. For instance, connectivity, we don't have to go drive far from Bay Area to see like a complete loss of connectivity. One such area is a place that I actually love is, for instance, Yosemite. So in Yosemite, when you drive there, there's no connectivity. So imagine when you go there with a car sharing vehicle from Gig or from like whatever operator, and one way that you open up and close is using your phone, right? That might not work that well. That's why you need those RFID cards from Zipcar, from Gig, and from all other providers. It's exactly because even for something, yes, you are the edge as a driver. You are the edge when the computing, you're the computing power, which is the edge to drive it around. But then when you want to open up, close, then having a lot of AI ML on edge is one thing, but then you still need some connectivity so that you can tell like, hey, now drone, go back. So it's similarly to like you need somehow an RFID card or a way to like an open vehicle that's a car sharing type of vehicle to get you out of Yosemite. So edge is great, but it's solving some of the issues. It's not solving all the other issues. So
yeah. So I'm a big fan of this whole data in the car. So I have this whole AV data course online because of that. But let's talk about UX, because I've been actually teaching some courses on AIX about we just said, okay, there's AI everywhere with so much data and we need interaction. But finally, that is what is going to give that confidence to people. And you have this whole podcast and,
Mm-hmm.
expertise with UX. And I see a question coming up. Emmanuel is asking, do you believe that delivery bots will have to establish themselves first from a user experience perspective before people will accept robotaxi? Is there a relation between the two in terms of user acceptance? And feel free to
Uh,
type in your
y-
questions, and if
yeah.
it makes sense, I would give you access to speak up, because we have
Yeah, I actually think, Emmanuel, a good question. I actually think there is a correlation, but it's not one-to-one. I actually think that what Robotaxi can give us is some sort of, not Robotaxi, the delivery bots can give us is some sort of acceptance for different form factors, as well as, and let's be honest, like we don't, there's not that many people that can that are as lucky as Sudha, that you can observe and like follow kiwi bots and so on. So for many people this is still like a sci-fi type of situation, but listening more about it, looking at it more, I think it opens up to different form factors. And I actually think that a successful robotaxi scheme will need something like a bit different vehicle. So from that perspective, yes, acceptance is important. I'm not necessarily sure it's like, it's definitely something to build on, but it's not necessarily like, one-to-one, like you need, one to get the other one. So good question. I see correlation.
So where else do you see UX playing a role? Because when I started teaching AIX, I focused it purely on the car, and I said
Mm-hmm.
passenger in-car experience. There was a lot of, every time at CES we have a whole bunch of
Mm-hmm.
AR, VR, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
voice. And we saw
Yeah.
voice come into the car, and Amazon did bring it, and there's a whole bunch of other players who give the voice platform. So what do you
Mm-hmm.
see? Talk about the CX and the UX in-car experience.
Mm-hmm.
What is
Yeah,
the
so great question. Well, let me also like say I would not claim to be a user experience UX experience a specialist in any sort. I focus mostly on customer experience and customer
yeah.
engagement. So um uh so okay, so from that perspective, when I'm thinking about customer engagement, uh in both cases of delivery bots, as well as actually more delivery bots than robotaxi, is almost like asking us to have a bit different experience and asking us to create different behaviors. So for instance, I feel that's why the pandemic is such a good catalyst for all of it, is because we are all forced to try to do new things.
Yep.
One very cool thing that I've heard is actually the fastest growing, and it's not surprising, but the fastest growing cohort to become a frequent online shopper, also for groceries, is the so-called silver cohort. So these might be our seniors. So like these might be people that are, normally not even for decades, or probably not never in their lifetime would, go and experience online
Yep.
shopping. But because pandemic hit, and they might feel uncomfortable going to the store and being around a lot of people, this is the cohort that is growing really fast when it comes to online shopping. um so I think this is it. I feel like when I'm thinking about delivery bots and CX, I actually feel that this immediate delivery is actually one of the great CX factors. So like a great customer satisfier. So when you're thinking about what satisfies you when you get your Amazon delivery, like first of all, like if you ordered a blue T-shirt and red T-shirt comes in, you're unsatisfied. So first of all, there needs to be a good fulfillment center and making sure that the product chosen is the correct one. But then the next thing that's cool is when this is delivered to you very quickly. So the time to delivery is actually a big customer experience or a customer satisfier. um, and then if you can schedule it to be at that time versus at that time, and all the other cool things might be more possible with delivery bots, I think that's even better. Another thing, and it's always not one thing that changes, it's always like we always need to look at the ecosystem of things. So for instance, probably we all know the story of General Magic. So General Magic was a company that was built in like early 1990s, that they actually built the first iPhone, so to speak, or like Android, like they built the first smartphone. The problem was the whole ecosystem wasn't ready for them. It was like, this thing called internet wasn't that widely available. There were no app stores, connectivity wasn't there, like, none of it was there. So this company were extremely innovative, couldn't survive. So I think the same thing is with AVs, and the same thing is with delivery bots. So we kind of need this ecosystem of things that are true before, things like delivery bots are true as well. But one of them is, for instance, a location of some sort of fulfillment center. And this is actually something that is interesting, because I see more and more smaller fulfillment centers that are not, miles outside of a city. And actually this is again something that that could potentially help us, get to some sort of delivery bots being more universal than, right now they're just, on campuses or in small places, in like smaller areas. So one thing to remember is like the whole ecosystem of things that needs to be true for an industry to flourish.
So before I forget, I actually have put the under Weekly Wednesday. I've created a new URL from where you all came from. So it's just Weekly Wednesday. It's like a weekly WED. So you can go there and on Driverless World School, and I've put the KiwiBot video that I keep on sharing. I did a tiny edited version. So you can see it in action. And I heard that KiwiBot, when it travels, they actually have a human being watching it, because they are doing logistics delivery. So they know exactly which route they're taking, where they're going. So they actually have people who are watching it, because I think by regulation they can't just drive autonomously, though I thought I was doing it and I was chasing it in my video, but looks like there are humans laughing at me somewhere while I'm doing that.
I'm pretty sure we're just like excited with you to see, your enthusiasm. But you may want to think of like inviting some people from KiwiBot specifically. And I think I met David, who I might introduce you to. But anyhow, I don't want to
talk to David, and one of the things we're trying to figure out whether there can be some projects. So one of the things I'm doing is, other than regular classes that we've done, we are doing some kind of industry projects with industry data, industry business problem, bringing it to class, and then in a team setting, the students do this online and solve that. That's a new thing called Capstone Lab that I'm testing out. And so I did have a chat with David from KiwiBot. We're trying to figure out what is that sweet spot that will be useful for them. They're super smart. They've thought about the psychology of the bots, the look of the bots, in terms of the experience. And they've shifted business model. Now they're doing this B2B delivery. So they're doing a lot of things, and they've expanded to new markets. So I'm trying to figure out what is that we could bring that would help our students, that could obviously help them. So if you have ideas, I'm happy to talk to you offline, and we can go back.
Sure. Yeah. So coming back to your earlier question, I don't want to speak specifically for KiwiBots, because you're probably better off talking to David directly. But in general, about all the bots and the humans behind it, I think a lot of the bots are still teleoperated, right? So this is one thing to remember. And it's not bad, right? It's not bad. Like I would not necessarily call it that because we're teleoperated. It immediately means like a failure of autonomous system. I think like you need one and the other, so to speak. So that's one thing. But the place, I'm not surprised. To be honest, I didn't know they moved to B2B, but I'm not surprised they did. because when you think from like all the perspective from the food delivery, one thing to remember is when I go in and order my Uber Eats or my DoorDash that brings me my, I don't know, my sushi or my ramen. One thing to remember is the driver actually needs to park the car, go into go into inside the restaurant and pick up the delivery, and then
Yeah.
go back and drive it to me. um Pandemic might have changed things, but when you're thinking about restaurant operations during the rush hours, no one has time to go to the curb to feed in the Kiwi bots or any other bot. I don't want to, I really don't want to speak here for Kiwi, because I think this is true for multiple other bots. So there's simply just, it would have to be like another someone to actually go in and so I'm not surprised they might actually have someone to go in and
Yeah.
actually fill in the bot with an order from a restaurant and so on and so forth. So
And that might be more
and
efficient instead of having the last mile delivery. In all this conversation, the last mile delivery problem is not yet solved. We just
of
made
course,
it easy with the pandemic that we don't want to touch it and we can leave it things outside. And I think, again,
exactly,
I don't want to talk so much about Amazon in one session, but Amazon has kind of been very opportunistic to use their Amazon key, saying, hey, we can open your garage and leave your things there. But I
yeah.
think that's not a scalable solution for last mile. So we still have the need the human, and it might make economic sense to have the human as the last mile delivery touch point person. It'll add to the UX, the CX experience that you're talking about also.
Yeah, absolutely right. Because like also think about it, the delivery window. Like if something is being delivered when I'm not home, and I'm not lucky enough to have a doorman, or I'm not lucky enough to have a place for the package to be stored, it can be simply mm, be stolen or something, or get lost, right? So the ability for instance, if a delivery bot were just to like drop it off on a curbside, but then having the opportunity to maybe schedule a delivery is something more, something that is a bit more realistic when it comes to having the delivery bots. And then like you said, like in probably in many scenarios it's still human work, because there might be staircase, there might be something that is just simply unmapped yet for the delivery bot. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely.
So
So the reason why I'm not surprised that there's like B2B and delivery of maybe some documents is because when we're talking about business environment, there is either somebody that needs this document so they can come down and pick up from the delivery bot, or maybe there is a receptionist and this person can come down and pick up.
so I
Yeah.
was not thinking of B2B as, actually working with companies and delivering documents. Just with the pandemic, opportunistically, what I heard is KiwiBot is not just delivering food for consumers, but supplies for the restaurant. So there's a coffee shop.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
But the same thing, right? There's an incentives for somebody. There is somebody that can come and pick it up, and there's an incentives for somebody to come and pick it up from
that's
the
right.
delivery bot. Yeah, yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yep. We spoke a lot about the whole delivery bot. I don't know if you know. I know there is a delivery bot in UK. If David wants to jump in and say what that is or add to it, I'm happy to hear that, so we can benefit from having him here. So feel free to tell us, David, if you feel like talking about the delivery bot. So we are just not marketing only for KiwiBot here all along. I try to be very brand agnostic, but I get very excited about brands that amaze me, and there's a lot of the different cars and delivery bots I seem to be tracking here. So I want to, before we have another 15 minutes, so I want to make sure that we cover an important shift that's happening, which is about general transportation ecosystem consolidation. So are you seeing changes there in terms of how, when we get back, we are going to have public transit? Are there partnerships in there? Is shifts or business models in there? What are you seeing?
Um, I don't know whether I guess I definitely don't want to speak on behalf of transit agencies. I think there's a lot of very smart people working there that are thinking about the day in, day out. One thing that possibly I feel can possibly happen, but at the same time, I don't feel like I've worked enough to really know it, is maybe incentivizing more people to use shared transport. And it can be some sort of a shared transport from transit agency, but it might be things around making sure that this time that I'll be using transit is also quite well connected with other modes. So like, going more to multimodal, and maybe this multimodal is a type of commuting is something that we can incentivize somehow.
There were a bunch, right? I remember in San Ramon, at the BART, we had this AV that would just come and drop users. I think when they get out of the BART, it will pick them and then take them to some office park. And there was some kind of bunch of vehicles that were testing out like that. I've not heard about them in recent times, but it makes sense also because cities are looking to save money and figure out how they will get back after the pandemic. So there might be some partnership. I remember VIA was doing some kind of replacement of buses. So
Yeah.
what do you mean by multimodal transportation in the post-COVID, or when we get back to mobility?
I think so there's two things. So like VIA is great. So I would call maybe what VIA is doing is definitely, it's like those buses on demand. So like mobility on demand, right? Like, so and this is a very cool thing that they've been doing. But then I think few other things that that can be done is exactly what you're saying, is, for instance, the fact that when a train station arrives, there is enough of other transportation modes for me to use to get to my final destination. Uh, it can be scooter, right? It can be an e-bike, it can be a normal bike, or it can be an Uber, right? Like whatever it is, right? So and that's what I mean about this multimodal. So making something as seamless as possible, that it is still convenient, but then it gets me out of using my own car.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, I feel what pandemic can possibly teach us, because one thing that's for transit agencies is very difficult is operating during the peak hours, as well as extending capacity in the peak hours. So there's always like a chicken and an egg problem, or like maybe a catch-22 here is, yes, we want more people on the buses and trains, but maybe we don't need to get more people on buses and trains exactly at the same time during the peak time.
Yeah.
So everything that can extend this peak time, or ensure that not everyone is going exactly for 9 a.m. to the office and coming back at 5 p.m. Anything that can help extend actually also helps transit agencies to a big extent.
Yeah.
And I think the pandemic is a great time for us to reshift our thinking about working in general. So maybe it is possible for me to take the first 2 calls of a day from home, and I can just join later. I think like there's the good thing that happened for transit agencies during pandemic is the more flexibility in the way we work. But at the same time, it's there's definitely a big hit to all transit agencies, or like a lot of transit agencies, because of this perceived danger of COVID.
I see a comment from Emmanuel, who was asking the question about the delivery bots earlier on the last mile topic that we were talking, saying, has anyone created a delivery bot that can go through the drive-through window for, say, McDonald's?
Maybe, Emmanuel, maybe that's a business model for you. Maybe this is what you should, think about.
I love this. That is the thing I love about my students. You just come at it at that, total lateral thinking. That's what this space needs. So we are almost, I think we have another, 9 minutes or so. One of the things I have started out is I had all these individual courses online, and I found that people want to come back and have this conversation and meet the community. So I'm just
Mm-hmm.
starting up a whole new offering called self-driving community on Driverless World School. I don't want to go and market and show that right now in the midst of this time that we have with you, but I would recommend people to look at it, especially my students who are here. If you look at it and give me feedback, I'll really appreciate it, because I just want to make sure that this community works for us, because we are here every Wednesday on Weekly Wednesday talking about interesting topics. But
I feel like I've been talking enough, so I think it's a good time if you'd like to share your screen, or like share with students right now, because I think it I don't mind. I think I've been talking for a long time, so maybe now it's
if
a
there
time
are
to
questions, I would not want that taken away.
sure, of course.
So if anybody has any other question or comment, I definitely would encourage and give time for that. I just will take a minute if you don't mind then.
Of
So
course.
with my favorite robot from my book cover, and I call this self-driving community with Sudha, Jamthe, which is a little up on my nose. On the nose with my name up there. So the thinking is, we have a whole bunch of courses that I've done that is available individually. The one with David, that is the autonomous vehicle masterclass, which is kind of still in demand for anybody getting in. The AV data one that I teach with Alexander Varga from Volvo. The AIX one is to bring UX designers into the mix. What does it look like to do machine learning UX or voice UX in the car? And then there's a whole bunch of collection of resources if people are looking at data sets or moving to career pivot, that kind of thing. So there's a bundle of courses, plus the whole idea of community is to come have a conversation. That's my picture with the Apple car, to just have a monthly live Q&A like this. We would have an opportunity in a closed room setting, pick a topic, and I put together a schedule to have that conversation. So I just thought we would do this like a membership model. So that's my thinking. I want to stop the share. So before we let you go, you're going to be back here, back to, because you're back in this whole energy with all the changes that is happening. If you were to pick one area, there's Waymo going the robotaxi direction, and Tesla. We never spoke about Tesla because Tesla is technically not a true self-driving car, but they're kind of disrupting the space. And Tesla is promising, hey, we are going to do robotaxi eventually, right? Personally, I know I'm not shy to go on air and make predictions when I call myself a futurist. I do not believe in the whole Tesla creating a robotaxi as a business model coming anytime soon. I do believe in Tesla's technology being adding the connectivity and shifting the space and disrupting the space. But that is one direction with the robotaxi. The other direction, if there are all these companies that have been funded, there's billions of dollars that's been funded, and many smart people working on this already in variety of different shapes of vehicles out there. Are they all going to go towards delivery in some form? Is that the hot space? Or do you see a whole transit partnership? Or do you see trucking? We didn't talk much about trucking. There's platooning that happens, it just keeps going. Is there, is anybody who's watching this who just wants to come back into this AV space, say, hey, it's heating up and it's exciting. What would you suggest they focus on? Is there one area you would pick? Especially these are business people who are looking at business model, creating a viable business. Do you have an area
That's a tough question. Yeah, that's a question. I actually think all of the above will happen eventually. I think from a business standpoint, I feel where there's a bit more belief, especially from a VC space, in feasibility of a business in the near term is actually tracking, especially especially the highway tracking. And yes, there's so many things we spoke about last mile, but the middle mile is growing so significantly as well, right? So I think the tracking and middle mile are probably the places where we can see some business feasibility. But I'm also extremely excited about all the other things that are still, still probably years in the making, like robotaxis, like deliveries. It's still, I'm actually very excited about all the new and cool things. But
So
yeah, I think like from a perspective of what's going to make the money first, I'd say it's middle mile and tracking.
so help people understand what is middle mile with trucking, especially for people.
Yeah. So middle mile is for instance between where like one example of middle mile is Gatik, where I think they have partnerships with Walmart,
Yeah.
and it's pretty much deliveries between a warehouse and a store, or like between two stores or between warehouses. So that's the middle mile, and this is where most of the work, it doesn't have to happen, most of the drive doesn't really happen on like highly dense areas,
Yeah.
highly dense urban areas. So a lot of it is just um, highway driving.
Yeah.
And then when we're talking about highway driving and we're talking about the shortage of driver, that's an opportunity as well.
The Peloton was in the same space, right? The
Yeah, the platooning. Yeah. So, absolutely. The difference over there is you need two tracks. You need the system to be in both tracks, and they need to be driving in the same location. I feel like there's so many benefits of this technology. But it feels to me there might be a bit more challenges when it comes to operational deployment. Not that it's not possible, but like you need to do smart, you need to think about good partners, fleet operators that would have a lot of those vehicles, and so on and so forth.
So business
uh,
development becomes a very important skill. It's not at all talked about, but I find that every time I go talk to any of these companies for real, not just chase their vehicle, the real action happens in the partnerships, in BD, and trying to give them that missing piece, or giving them channel to kind of scale that next piece of the business. So do you see a lot of consolidation happening in the space?
Yeah, well, definitely. Like we started seeing it, right? Like with Amazon and Jokes. There's definitely consolidation, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that the new companies will start to pop up, because there's so many, amazing thoughts. And just on this call, Emmanuel brought up another thing, like, hey, maybe we need a delivery bot that can just drive through and collect deliveries this way, right? So I think there's still a lot of interesting problems to be solved. So the new companies will be popping up. But when it comes to like on all spectrum, from sensor suites to in the end the solution providers, especially for the end users, there will be consolidation all the way. Like I don't think we have, it's probably another topic.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, tell us where we can find out about women in autonomous vehicle. Is there a women that you're interviewing that we need to look out for? Obviously, you're
Yeah, so
leaders in
it's
the space.
so we don't it's not only autonomous, we focus on all female in automotive space. So
Okay.
the you can find us by looking us either on LinkedIn, it's womaninAutotech.org, or no, sorry, that's on the website. WomaninAutotech.org is our website, or looking for women in automotive technology on LinkedIn. It's another place where you can find us. And then you can also search for a podcast called On the Move, which is that I'm doing with Lisa.
Yeah.
As well as, if you're interested in the CX space, you can go and look up the podcast about CX specifically, which is called the Loyalty Map, and it's our Info Edge podcast.
So what is this one called? The CX one, the podcast?
The Loyalty Map.
Oh, the loyalty map.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Awesome. So one of the things I promised is, after we finish up, we usually get the recording. So if you go to Weekly Wednesday in the same place, I want to make sure no clutter of all past recordings, because we've been doing this for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
Just this week's recording is going to show up, and I will make sure the links that we have, the resources we've got from our speaker, is included in there. So if you go to Weekly Wednesday, where you signed up from, you'll get the recording and the links, and you can come back next week, and we'll just keep it clean. So that's my promise.
Sure.
So keep me accountable towards that.
Okay.
Can people connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. Find me on LinkedIn, Karolina Chachulska or Chachulska. I think I'm, the first and last name, Karolina with a K, and so the first and last name are somewhat complicated, so there won't be that many of us
It's very
on
unique.
LinkedIn.
Once you remember the name, I think people can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to connect. I'd love to talk to you and hear about new things, exciting things you're working on. I'd be more than happy to provide links to some of the things we spoke before. So I think you put in as a comment a 14% as a year-over-year drop. I can put links to some of those resources as well for you.
Okay, awesome. I will follow up and I'll make sure that we put this back on the weekly Wednesday area, and people are just thanking you and saying they are enjoying it and they loved it. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciated it. It's always great to connect with you and the rest of the students.
Thank you so much. And be sure to connect. I know we have an international mix of people here and we spoke a very, US centered view. Today, we usually don't, but we had so much to cover from your experience here, Karolina. So I hope you will connect with each other and talk to each other, because that's where the magic happens. With that, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you, everybody. And I will see you all next week. Come back and check the recording. And
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks. Bye-bye. Take care. Looking forward to chatting with everybody.
Bye.